Hey there. Welcome to First Look from a disclosed location in my house. Uh, this is just kind of where life had to take place today, so I'm glad that you're here. So, last week I feel like was completely rid of distraction, at least in terms of what we were able to do and what we were able to talk about when it came to the passage for the week. It wasn't a particular Sunday. It wasn't anything that we were kind of trying to do or accomplish. We wanted to kind of look at things from an angle of like, how might the leadership prayerfully discern where we're headed as a congregation. But in terms of the worship itself, it wasn't like a theme or a particular kind of week, or we weren't doing anything in worship that was had a season attached to it, really. It was just like, look at the passage, see where it takes you. And I feel like this one is similar. So we're still in 1 Corinthians. And I think what I like about this text, and what I like about the opportunity to kind of like look at it with you in the way that we are, is that it really focuses on this, again, this like core fundamental idea. And so we get a chance to look at it because we know the idea so well, the concept of resurrection. We know it so well. And so why not just kind of like see where it takes us and not worry about trying to cover all the bases or explain to you exactly what it means or whatever. Just kind of free form, see where it is. So I'm going to read it real quick, and then we can just sort of ponder it together. So we're still in 1 Corinthians. This is chapter 15. This is one of those passages that kind of skips a little bit. So it goes from 35 to 38 and then 42 to 50. So I really haven't read this yet, so I'm going to read it now. Let's see. I think this is an NIV, in case that matters to you, or if you're reading along. Starting in verse 35. But someone may ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? Okay, so kind of a logistical question. How foolish. What you sow does not come to life unless it dies. When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or of something else. But God gives it a body as he has determined, and to each kind of seed he gives its own body. And then it skips down. 42. So it will be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable. It is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written. One second. There we go. Can't do two things at once. If there is a natural body, there is a spiritual body. So it is written. The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit, meaning Jesus. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after that the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, the second man from heaven. As was the earthly man, so are those who are of the earth. And as is the man from heaven, so also are those who are of heaven. And just as we have borne the likeness of the earthly man, so shall we bear the likeness of the man from heaven. I declare to you, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling in an eye of the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. So some of that, as you would imagine, is answering a very practical question, one that I don't think we still have memorized, that we still kind of like have in our minds. I think we have a concept of what we believe could be, or what heaven or something after our lives could look like, but we know it's kind of fuzzy. We know it only comes in half understandings. But Paul is trying to, I think, do a couple of really important things in talking about this. The first one is that he's trying to make sure that the people understand that this isn't something kind of hypothetical or metaphorical, that he's trying to really emphasize how literal and real and otherworldly, I'm going to use the term supernatural, but I mean that in the sense of like something that goes beyond what is natural, at least the way that we see nature play out. He's really trying to draw a line for people that he's not talking about something that kind of will happen in their minds, or will happen, again, as parabolically, but will literally happen. And I think if you're raised in a world where there's a lot of different religions, and there's a lot of philosophy, and like all sorts of things that are sort of in front of you, and the way that that's understood is as numerous as there are philosophies or religions, then you want to be as explicit as you can be about what you're actually talking about, and that there isn't a difference between our body and the one to come, other than what difference that God draws, meaning that who we are from beginning to end is going to change. It involves all of us. It isn't like who we are now is somehow discarded in some like it doesn't matter, right? There's no duality. And there were philosophies that I think like Gnostic kind of ways of understanding God, or ways of understanding the world, that they were trying to combat, right? Some of the language that you see in the letters has a lot to do with trying to compare and contrast the philosophies of the day. And you see that in this letter a little bit, but you also but you get it a lot in other letters, either by Paul or those who take on Paul's name. So that's an element here that they're trying to make sure that people know, okay, I know that you understand these different philosophies, or these different religions, or these different ways of understanding the world, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something different, something else. So that's the first thing. And, we can understand that. If I was introducing Christianity to you, and all you had to compare it to was either your own religion, say you were coming out of a Mormon tradition or a Jewish tradition or any kind of tradition, and you were trying to understand what it meant to be Presbyterian, well, you'd have to draw some sort of comparison and contrast. But also, if you were trying to understand Christianity from a modern context, you'd say like, okay, you understand, maybe you understand astrology, or maybe you understand different methods of understanding the world, like you understand love language, or you understand someone's Enneagram, or any kind of way that we try to categorize and organize who we are, what we think, why we approach the world we do, the way we do. If you were doing that in 2025 in the United States, that's maybe what you'd have to do. In the same way that you would if you were introducing a new political system into a world that only knew, capitalism or democracy or socialism or communism or something. If you were introducing something else, you'd have to draw some kind of comparison. And that's a lot of what Paul ends up doing. Peter ends up doing, Timothy, a few other letter writers end up trying to kind of draw those comparisons. The other one I think is just, even if you understand those things, even if you're a person of faith and you get what Christianity is at its core, you may also want to try to understand to what degree, to what end is your faith going to take you? Are we talking about something that I'll find comfort until I die, but when I die, I just sort of drift off into the void? Or is there something to this resurrection? Am I supposed to draw some sort of understanding about what it means and what it does and who I will be afterwards? And, how literal is that? What does it mean for the people who have died? What does it mean for those who will come after me? If that isn't established, then you have to establish it. And that's what I think is what Paul is doing. And there's supposed to be a comfort in that. I'm supposed to find that comforting, to know that is what's true. And I think the other thing to find comforting and to find kind of holistic is the fact that Paul says, look, you have your body now. That's not the body you'll have later. And I don't think that's meant to say that the body is bad or evil or terrible. That all flesh is, sometimes you get into these kind of religious conversations where we talk about the sins of the flesh, and we talk about how weak we are. And, those aren't really that's not your flesh that's weak. I mean, that's our mind and spirit and temperaments and attitudes and, morals and emotions. I think part of what it's really talking about when it talks about the body is like a seed and it will become something that it's not now, is that, you dealt with a time, obviously, where there was a lot of death and disease, and there's not, penicillin and doctors, and how many times do we see Jesus, healing the sick or the blind or those who are lame or the leper, or, those are all legitimate, concerns about the body and what will come of it, eternally. Basically, will the issues of this world, will the problems of this world, physical or otherwise, follow me into, the eternal future that God has for me? And the answer is no, they're not going to follow you into the future that God has for you. And again, that might be something that you and I think of as so fundamentally core that we think, well, of course that's true. Well, it has to be established. So that's a part of what you see Paul do here, is kind of establish what's true. Looking at that from the context of Corinth, again, we've talked a lot about their trouble working through the disparities that they found in the congregation. Those who have a lot and those who don't. Well, if in the resurrection you have everyone is being made new, that means everyone, right? That means that in Christ, in the resurrection, we're all equal. That anything that you brought into life, or anything you got wrong, or anything you wish you did differently, or whatever, that those things don't follow you into where you're going. And so there's a humility to that. There's a lifting up to that. It's a leveling of the playing field in some ways. And that core concept is a big deal. It's huge. If you think about a life of hardship or poverty or otherness, or just not feeling like you got the life that you hoped for, or you spent your life in pain, or struggling with disease, whatever it happened to be, that you knew that there was something for you. But also, if you had a life of luxury and whatever, that didn't mean that you got something more in heaven, or that your resurrection would somehow be better than someone else's. And so you should treat people like where you're headed and where they're headed are the same place. And what would it mean if we actually treated people like we were all the same in the eyes of God? I don't see that happen almost anywhere. And, I think that's why I think it's emphasized as much as it is now. How much better would we treat each other if we knew that where we were headed was the same? That, life shouldn't be the way that it is, with these big gaps between people. And I think people like to talk about that, like, oh yeah, we should all have everything we need. People like that idea until they actually have to start thinking about how that would happen. Well, God will take care of it. Okay, well, maybe the way God's taking care of it is you doing something differently, or me doing something differently, or us all doing something differently. And then when you say, well, you should be doing something differently, people say, well, I don't want to do anything differently. Like, I like the privileges I have. I like the life that I have. Those people should get their lives together, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's always okay in the hypothetical until things get real. And that's the other, I think, part of this. The resurrection is not an intellectual exercise. It's real and coming, and, it's like that kind of urgency. And, that life isn't this intellectual exercise. Like, real people suffer because of the things that we do or don't do. Maybe you don't like some situation. Well, this shouldn't be, and so we're gonna stop that from happening. But you never get around to actually making sure that the people have what they need. That's the hard part, I think, about being a person of faith, being a human, is just recognizing that it doesn't always have to be that, well, if I don't like something, then I should just eliminate it and let the chips fall where they may. Your sense of fairness isn't really the be-all, end-all of anything. And that, I think, we have the obligation to each other to say, this system doesn't work well, okay. This isn't functioning right, okay. Let's have a plan. Let's let it function better. Let's make it so that people have what they need. And then let's worry about how to make it, perfect. But far too often I feel like I see people say like, oh, we should just get rid of this thing, whatever it is, but then not really have a plan as to what to do with the people that you're cutting off so quickly. We don't act with as much empathy as we need to. And, you know, it's disappointing and it's hard. And I don't think that there's a perfect answer, but I think that the only answer I've ever seen that helps me sleep at night about what we're doing is one that comes with compassion attached to it. I don't understand any other way to kind of approach things or live. But I think that kind of story and lesson about resurrection should help us feel like there's a hope towards wholeness. That if we keep trying and keep working and keep putting our own grudges down, that we can somehow get to something that does feed and clothe and keep warm all those in the world who need to be all those things. And yeah, it might mean that your life changes or my life changes, but it also could mean that the people around us get what they need. And I don't think it's wanting to see that happen is a bad thing. So I'll keep advocating for that wherever I see it possible. Faith is something that should compel us, I think, to lean into our most natural inclinations towards peace and wholeness. I think it should always help us to lean into our most natural inclinations of helping and caring. And any time that we face situations where our natural inclination is to be violent or bullying or not sympathetic or not caring, anytime that our decision making leads us to those places of feeling angry or feeling like excluding people, I think that should be a warning sign to us. What am I not thinking about? How am I not seeing this the right way? And really, I think if you knew anything about me or knew anything about any of the sermons that I preach, it's that everything we do should lead us to thinking about how we can improve the lives of the people around us through genuine care. And anytime you do something that leads to something that is destructive or that tears people down or that separates people or that makes people feel deflated, defeated, harmed, cheated, unimportant, feel used or abused, you should probably stop and think, maybe this isn't the right thing to do. That sounds really simple until I start really talking about it. So I guess we should talk about it more and more so that what I mean comes through clearly. I need to be more explicit. So maybe I'll work on that. Anyway, those are my thoughts for this week. I'm trying to work through my own. I've been really enjoying looking at one book for a while, and so I'm glad that we've got a chance to do that. Because pretty soon we're going to be looking at, Lent and Gospels and, moving towards Easter and doing that. But we have this little sliver of time where we don't really have to, the season doesn't kind of push us in one direction. So why not kind of explore that for a little bit? That's what I got. So thanks for joining in this undisclosed location. Thanks for being you. And I'll look forward to talking with you again for another first look. So until then, take care.